Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. I don't know about you, but on my X account yesterday, it was flooded with all this news of tornadoes around Washington, D.C. or in the Washington, D.C. area. And here's a graphic. This is Evan Fisher on X. And here's Washington, D.C. right here. And there's a bunch of tornado reports in that area. So I knew that I was going to be making a video about this. And now this is like the final one where I've decided I've got to start keeping track of these, what seem to be signs for the United States. I've talked about this before, but it just seems like there's been a lot of things going on, or we've been having a lot of signs that do not look good for the United States specifically. So whenever I get a collection of signs or things happening that have to do with a particular category, I make a new spreadsheet for it. So this is my new spreadsheet. It's called Signs United States. And I went through, thought of all the things that I could, that we've seen recently, that have been going on. And so I have things stretching from 2021 until now, but especially this year. There's been a lot this year, but there's been some interesting things. So we'll just go one by one and I'll show you what I have. So the first thing, and you can think of more. If you have like more things to add to this, send them my way. I may or may not add it to the spreadsheet because, I have to use my best judgment of what I think is significant, but feel free to send it my way. So this is by no means like a comprehensive list of everything, but this is just what I've talked about on the channel, what I can think of. So I have to be careful with what I say, because if I'm not, then, things could happen. So first we had this event. This is the first one that I have on the list. I specifically remember when this happened because I had a phone appointment with the VA, and this was kicking off. I was watching it on the news and I was like, I'm sorry, ma'am, I have to go. Something is happening right now. And, and so I dipped out of my appointment that I was having because there was a major event going on, and I think it was a major event. And like most of the time, I don't care to talk about the politics of it. This is a very heated thing, but it happened, regardless of how you view it. Regardless of who you think the good guys are or the bad guys are, it doesn't matter. It happened. And it was quite the scene. And it's not something that you want to see happening in the United States. Again, regardless of whatever you believe happened, I don't think either side really, if you're true in your heart, you don't want to see this happening in the nation's capital, but it happened. And okay, so that's all I need to say about that. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, now, this is really interesting. As I was making this spreadsheet, I was thinking of all the different signs, and I was like, you know what? We just recently rededicated the Washington, D.C. temple. That was making a lot of news. I was covering that on the channel because there were all these like very notable people going through the temple. There's like a new Second Coming painting that's displayed really prominently in the temple. So all these like dignitaries would have seen the Second Coming painting, and it just seemed like a big event. I remember thinking that this was significant. Now, do temples need to be rededicated occasionally? Of course they do. Of course they do. But the time that this is happening, along with other temples like the Pioneer Era temples, the Salt Lake Temple in particular, it just felt like the timing was interesting. It's interesting enough that it's happening during President Nelson's presidency. He's like probably the biggest Second Coming prophet. After him would probably be Ezra Taft Benson. I have a spreadsheet where I've like looked at all the number of times they've talked about the Second Coming, and President Nelson is in the first place. Ezra Taft Benson second. So this happened. It happened August 14th, 2022. 14 is 2 sevens, by the way. And I'll point out that it's one of the few temples that President Nelson has dedicated or rededicated. So this is my temple spreadsheet. The first, now these are just dedications. I don't have rededications on here. So the first one that I'm aware of that he dedicated was back when he was president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles in 2016. It was the Sapporo, Japan temple. After that, as president of the church, his first temple that he dedicated as president of the church was the Concepcion, Chile temple. And then after that, he dedicated the Rome, Italy temple, which was a singular event because all 15 apostles went there to attend it. And that's where President Nelson said that this event was a hinge point in the history of the church. And it was just like, it was a big deal. And during that trip, he met with the Pope, which is the first time that a president of the church has met with a Pope. So it was really significant. Now, he has rededicated some temples. For example, the Manti, Utah temple. That was a special temple to him. And then, dang, was there another one? Another rededication by him? I don't think so. So the Manti, and then the Washington, D.C. temple. This is obviously a really significant temple. So this was really important to him. He's the one that rededicated it. And is this what set off the rest of these events? Is this like the first thing in a series? Like this is a marker, like, okay, you know, we have this in the nation's capital. We know that temples, whenever a temple is constructed, it reduces the power of Satan. So having it in key locations probably helps. I'm sure that it helps. And that's why it's an even bigger deal to have a new temple built, especially in certain locations. So, okay, so that happened. And then later that year, so this was August, and then in November, we had our first ever, in the nation's history, first ever election day blood moon. Again, it's almost cartoonish. It's like so obvious that it's like something straight from a cartoon. When you have a blood moon, something called a blood moon, a red moon in the sky on election day, and it's the first time in the nation's history. And a time like this, after we just had this that happened because of what happened in that year with, you know, people choosing who they want to lead the country. And then you have this, just a couple. Okay, so again, this is 2021. We're effectively, 2020, and then 2 years later, you have this happen in the midst of all this controversy. No, I don't think it's a good sign. I really don't think it's a good sign. It's basically between the 2020, let's just call it selections, and then the 2024 selections, right? In the middle of that, you have the first ever blood moon on this day. It's also interesting to note that it happened on the 8th. Recently, I've been talking about my spreadsheet for numbers, and I added the number 8. And I had always thought of 8 while doing this channel as the start of a new cycle, because a cycle is 1 through 7, like when we're thinking about the creation of the earth, the days of the week. So the 8th day is like the start of the next cycle. But recently, as I made this spreadsheet, I was thinking about 8 in the sense of accountability, right? Because once you turn 8 years old, you're now at the age of accountability. And we've thought about President Oaks. If he becomes the next president of the church, he's going to be the 18th. And again, he's the judge. So I know it's 18, but I think sometimes how it can work is you just look at the last number potentially. And he's the judge, right? We've thought about the symbolism of President Nelson being the heart surgeon, working on the heart of the church, trying to make us all of one heart and one mind in preparation for the judgment at the time of the second coming. And so symbolically, it would work out really well with President Oaks being the judge if he's the one during the second coming. But anyway, you have this event take place on the 8th of November. We've also talked about November and the number 11 during President Nelson's hashtag Give Thanks video that he recorded. The details that he received from the Lord as to like how long the video should be, what day it should be published, and the time. There were a lot of 11s. The length of the video was 11 minutes long. It was during the 11th month in November, and it was released or published at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. So here's another 11 and the 8th day of the month. So I don't know. Okay, and then next, this is kind of what started me thinking about signs. Well, no, the first one was the eclipse, but then this one kind of kicked it into the next gear when you had this cargo ship that rammed into or collided with this bridge in Baltimore. Baltimore is not too far from Washington, D.C. Let me pull up Google Earth. Okay, you see Baltimore right here. I think Baltimore is the closest big city to Washington, D.C. It is. Oh, and by the way, we're going to be talking about the tornadoes at the end. It's the most recent event, but like the main tornado of all these tornadoes was the one that hit Gaithersburg. And that was only 17 miles away, 17, 18, something like that, miles away from Washington, D.C. So that's why I have that measurement there. So anyway, okay, so you had this event take place, cargo ship colliding with this bridge, but it's not just any bridge. Let's go to the spreadsheet. It is the Francis Scott Key Bridge that collapsed. And Francis Scott Key, that the bridge is named after, was the author of the text of the American national anthem. So I feel like that sends a message. If you have eyes to see, ears to hear, some people look at that and they're like, oh, that's not a good sign. The national anthem is a very strong symbol of our nation, of course. And it just happened to be that it was the day after the Kirtland Temple reopened under the ownership of the church on the 25th of March. So, interesting timing. Not only that, though, but after this took place, once we got to General Conference, once we got to General Conference just a little while later. In fact, wait, let me look at the calendar here. Something I just realized. Okay, so this happened on the 26th, and the General Conference was it was like 2 weeks away. So about 2 weeks later, you had General Conference, and there was this really interesting talk by Elder Gary E. Stevenson of the Quorum of the 12, where the name of the talk is Bridging the Two Great Commandments, and the object lesson that he uses is actual bridges. Okay. He talks about the fact that he likes suspension bridges. Let me just read an interesting part of the talk. He says, when traveling, we have little time for sightseeing. However, when possible, I spend a few moments in a particular passion. I have an interest in architecture and design and a special fascination with bridges. Suspension bridges amaze me. Whether it's the Rainbow Bridge in Tokyo, the Singma Bridge in Hong Kong, the Tower Bridge in London, or others I've seen, I marvel at the engineering genius built within these complicated structures. Now here's the key part. Pay attention. Bridges take us places we otherwise would not be able to go. Okay? Bridges take us places we otherwise would not be able to go. And then he says, before I continue, I note that since this message was prepared, so he wrote this first. A tragic bridge accident occurred in Baltimore. We mourn the loss of life and offer condolences to affected families. All right. So I highlight that bridges take us places that we otherwise would not be able to go for a couple reasons. Um, I'll show you in a minute. Down here, he says, it is a classic suspension bridge with bookend towers. So, referring to, like, you see this right here, like the Golden Gate Bridge. He referred to these two towers as bookend towers. And that's a word that I've been using for a long time on this spreadsheet, where we've noticed a bunch of different events that seem to correspond with each other or run parallel to each other. So, like an event that would happen toward the beginning of President Nelson's presidency and one more recently. And there were so many of these that I had to make a spreadsheet for them. Everything from meteors to these blue moons, not just blue moons, but blue moons that happen at the same time as other lunar events, like at the same time. Foxes at the Temple Mount, asteroids, solar flares, fires in places called Paradise, by the way. The first one in California, the one in the middle in Lahaina, Hawaii, and then the last one in Valparaiso, Chile, which means Valley of Paradise. Anyway, there's just like a bunch of these things, probably the best example of which are the eclipses. Yeah, the one that happened on President Monson's birthday, August 21st, 2017, the eclipse where the path of totality went over Jackson County, Adamandayaman, and far west. And then we had one kind of in the middle of these, not like in the middle, but like between these, that went over Utah, and the path of totality missed all the temples except for one that was in operation, the Monticello, Utah temple. And that eclipse happened 7 days after the Hamas war started. And then the most recent one, the eclipse that I went to go see at the Kirtland Temple, went over the Kirtland Temple a month after we purchased it. It also went over Palmyra, or in other words, the Sacred Grove, and a few other key church sites. So I thought of these as like parentheses or bookends, where it's like, oh, is the Lord trying to like be like, look at this period of time in between these different events. They all center on President Nelson. But now, after reading his talk, I kind of feel like it's more like bridges, like a transition point, or you could say a hinge point, right? Going from one era to another era. And with all these bridges that I have so far, we're on the other side at this point, right? Now, on the flip side, if we go back to what he said about bridges taking us places that we otherwise would not be able to go, in this bridge representing potentially the United States, we know that when Christ comes, there aren't going to be any nations anymore like there are today, at least not sovereign. It's just going to be one political kingdom of Christ over the whole world. And so if you have a bridge that used to take you places that you wanted to go, right? We had a nation that served its purpose. Well, maybe it's at its end. It's over now. We're not crossing that bridge anymore. We're not crossing the bridge of man anymore. Okay, so after that, and this was soon after, so the bridge collapse was on the 26th of March, and then just like a week or two after that, there was a lightning bolt that struck the Statue of Liberty that was caught on camera. Before you say anything about, the Statue of Liberty and other tall structures, they get hit all the time by lightning, I realize that, but having it caught on camera is not as common, and that's what's important. Because what's important about that is a sign is a message. It's a communication, right? That's what matters. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if like a grasshopper jumps on your car, or, you see, or you hear somebody say a particular phrase. If it's something that you feel the Spirit with and it communicates something to you, then it's a sign. It doesn't have to be the suspension of natural laws. That's what a lot of people, for some weird reason, they think that nothing is from God unless the laws of physics are broken and is completely unexplainable. Makes no sense to me. So when you have something that catches people's attention, it's odd, it's unusual, it causes you to have a sense of awe or wonder. It can be a sign. And so this is something that happened just a couple weeks after the bridge collapse, where you got this amazing picture right here of lightning hitting the Statue of Liberty. It doesn't matter that we know that it happens. It does not matter. How often do you actually see it? You know, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen anything like this before. It doesn't matter that it may happen every month, right? Let me just show you an example. So if you go to X, this is Mila Joy. I'm not sure who that is, but she has a check mark. She says, first a lightning bolt hits the Statue of Liberty yesterday, and today an earthquake shakes them silly. Why do you think God is so mad at New York? And we're going to talk about that earthquake in just a second because that is the next event. But you see how it goes? Like, it's the impression that it gives people. That's what matters. This is a dramatic thing. It's not something that you usually see, even though it may be happening without you seeing it all the time. But then when you do see it, and especially when you see it at a key time, right? Like, for example, she put together that this and then the earthquake took place within like a couple days of each other. That's unusual. It can be explained, yes, but it's unusual enough to where you can feel like, wow, putting this all together, the visuals, the symbolism of the visuals, the proximity of them together, the timing, then you get a sense that, well, this might actually be something that the Lord is trying to communicate, right? And by the way, it just so happens that the day that this photo was taken, it was 3 days before General Conference, but more than that, it was the 188th anniversary of the appearance of Christ, Moses, Elijah, and Elias in the Kirtland Temple. So again, with what we just talked about with eights, it was the 188th anniversary. It's interesting. And just before General Conference. And just after the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed. It's weird. It's weird. But now the next one. And this is one day before General Conference. The day before. There was a rare 4.8 magnitude earthquake near White House Station, New Jersey, felt in New York City and shakes the Statue of Liberty. Okay, so here's the news article. You can find this on YouTube. The videos are all over the place, but I got this one on X from Investigate Earth podcast. And, you see the Statue of Liberty shaking from this earthquake. And it's rare. It was a rare earthquake. You usually don't get earthquakes like that in the New York City area. That's why it made news. But geez, look at that. That cannot be good. You see New York City shaking like crazy because the camera's moving. But that's not a good visual. That's not something that you want to see. The Statue of Liberty in New York City shaking like crazy. Right? So, lightning bolt hits the Statue of Liberty. It's caught on camera. Then a couple days later, the Statue of Liberty literally shakes. And it's caught on camera. Okay. Well, and then skipping forward a little bit more recently, I did a video about this. Going to be careful how I talk about it, but this happened. It's the first time that this has happened to somebody that has led our nation. And I don't know that we know the full implications of it, but it's probably not going to be good as we progress through the year. I'm actually kind of nervous about that. Now, don't get me wrong, not nervous in the fact that I fear. I'm just saying, I'm not afraid. I focus on trying to live righteously and progress and do what I can, and then hoping that the Lord will protect me and my family, because generally that is what happens. If you live righteously in the last days, it's God's covenant people that have a promise of protection, even though we may not all escape it entirely, or we may hardly escape. I still trust in that promise. But this is not something that I want to see happen. Nobody should want for this to happen, because of the way that it affects the country. It ruins, this track record ever since the founding of the country, that something like this has never happened. But this happened, and this is huge. Like, all these things kind of like point to the idea. If you boil it all down, it kind of like points to, a crumbling, a collapse, the end, of the history of this country, right? And I assume it's because we're getting close to when Christ's kingdom is going to be implemented. This period is coming to an end. That's what this all feels like to me. All of it. Okay, so that happened, and then that brings us up to yesterday. Okay, so Maryland tornado aftermath. Cleanup continues Thursday after storm downs trees, cut power. What? Maryland tornado aftermath. Cleanup continues Thursday after storms down trees, cut power. Okay, fine. Gaithersburg, Maryland. Several were injured after severe weather, including tornadoes, swept through the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia regions on Wednesday night, leaving a path of downed trees, damaged homes, and power outages. All right. We got this. Fox 45 News. The Montgomery County tornado just made Maryland weather history. Here's why. All right, Gaithersburg, Maryland. Montgomery County was rocked by a rare, powerful tornado. I should have highlighted that. Rare. Okay, rare. Powerful tornado Wednesday night that left a path of destruction through the Gaithersburg area. But the storm that produced the tornado also left a mark on Maryland weather history. Once it became apparent the storm was producing a dangerous tornado, the local office of the National Weather Service issued a quote-unquote particularly dangerous situation, or a PDS. Okay, so the local office of the National Weather Service issued a PDS tornado warning for Montgomery County. It was the first time the Baltimore, Washington National Weather Service office has ever issued such a warning, according to meteorologist in charge Jim Lee. So for this area that this center covers, which is the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area, this is the first time that a PDS tornado warning has ever been issued. Not a good sign. Not a good sign. And on top of that, again, all these tornadoes that we've been seeing since April, it all started in Utah. Look right here. It all started in Utah. Sorry, it started in Utah, of all places. And not just in Utah, you guys. The Salt Lake Valley. I need to make this crystal clear. Every year in Utah, let's see. Let me look this up. Okay, average number of tornadoes in Utah per year. About 3. Okay, Utah averages about 3 tornadoes a year. But it's not typically along the Wasatch Front, which are the large mountains on the east side of Salt Lake and Provo, and right, because of those mountains, because they're valleys. So that's what makes these tornadoes stand out. In particular, the one in 1999, August 11th. There's another 8 and 11, by the way. I just thought about that right now. August 11th. Oh my gosh. August 11th, 1999. And then you have this one that just took place on April 25th of this year. Okay. That's what makes it so unique and rare, is that it's not just in Utah somewhere, it's in the Salt Lake Valley, which does not happen very often at all. Okay. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's report for that day, April 25th. This little red dot right here, see tornado reports. This is the first one in this long series of tornadoes that's still ongoing. And what's interesting is that for 20 days in a row after this tornado, well, starting with this day and for 20 days in a row, the United States saw tornadoes every single day. And then the day that it ended, I already forgot, I think it was May 15th, which was the day that the Aaronic priesthood was restored. It was the anniversary. I can't remember how many years, but it was the anniversary of the date when the Aaronic priesthood was restored. That day saw a break from tornadoes, and then it continued after that. It hasn't been a continual streak, but the tornadoes continue all the way up until yesterday. In a place that you typically don't see tornadoes, or if you do, they're not as strong as what we saw, where there was a PDS tornado warning. It all started in Utah. Just like how it feels like all these events that we're covering in this video, with the exception of this one, it feels like they all started with the rededication of the Washington, D.C. temple. And I don't think that I'm far off the mark on that. So here's here's another map kind of showing. I think this one's actually, I think the better one is this one. I think this one is more updated. So this is what the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area looked like yesterday. This is from Matthew Capucci. I've intercepted 27 tornadoes in my career. If you showed me this photo, I'd say Kentucky, Missouri, or Eastern Oklahoma. Welcome to Maryland when you have a Great Plains atmospheric environment. And here's the picture. He would never have guessed that this was Maryland, but it was. There's this one, Lenny McGarvey. Tornadoes aren't supposed to be happening in Maryland, Montgomery County, but it is. It is. And again, only about 17, I guess it depends on where you put the thing here, 17, maybe 18 miles away from Washington, D.C. So, yeah, and that's what I have. Well, okay, here's, a couple more things. So yesterday, when these tornadoes took place, it was Jerusalem Day, the day that they celebrate the capture of Jerusalem during the 6-Day War in 1967. So that could be another connection, but it was Jerusalem Day when this happened. Okay, and then the next thing that I'm looking for that you could that you can predict it's going to happen at some point. I just want to remind you that there's this list of world leaders, the longest serving, the longest living of their kind. So, for example, Japan's longest serving prime minister, he was assassinated in 2022. After that, Mikhail Gorbachev, the longest living leader of the Soviet Union, passed away. Then you have Queen Elizabeth II, the longest reigning British monarch, that passed away the day before President Nelson turned 98, becoming the oldest living prophet or apostle of this dispensation. So again, like the imagery of like worldly kingdoms, nations, organizations crumbling just in a symbolic sense, while the church continues, the kingdom of God continues. And you have all these other nations represented, China, you have Hawaii with the last Hawaiian princess, the Catholic Church, Greece, European Union, Denmark, Italy. I have 3 American flags here that represent the different branches of government. But the one that I'm waiting for is the president himself, which meaning President Jimmy Carter, who was the longest living U.S. president. And he was born just like a month or two after President Nelson. He's currently in hospice care. And I think of this series of like incredibly influential and powerful nations, the Soviet Union, the UK, Japan, China, Greece, European Union as a whole, Italy, Denmark. It would make sense that if there's like something symbolically going on, that the United States may be the last one because of the role that it's played excuse me, in church history and in world history in these last days. Okay. So anyway, just a quick review. This happened, and then the Washington, D.C. temple was rededicated, and that seemed to be a big event. And then later that year, just a few months later, the first ever Election Day blood moon. And then this year, the collapse of the National Anthem Bridge is probably how you could think about it. A photo capturing the Statue of Liberty being struck by lightning. Just a couple days later, that same Statue of Liberty shakes from a rare earthquake that could be felt throughout New York City. And then this happens, right? First time in the nation's history. And then yesterday, Jerusalem Day, and pretty close, too close for comfort to Washington, D.C. You have these rare tornadoes, and the first time that a PDS tornado warning has been issued for Montgomery County. That's what I have so far. Okay, well that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. Like this video if you liked it. Leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.